Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello there. It's Dr. Gemma. Welcome to the Cognitive Podcast, episode 119 of the new series. I think we can safely call this episode the Blizzard of 23. I am broadcasting to you live and warm and comfortable and snug in our little farmhouse as I look out at the remnants of a blizzard in Southern California. You know exactly the thing you think of when you say, I'm going to move out of southeast Washington state by the Idaho border where we had 10-foot drifts every winter. I'm going to go someplace where never bloomin' snows, where snow will mean that stuff you see 1,000 feet above you on the mountains all around your peaceful farm valley. Yeah, that place. Anyway, we are here on Rancho Cognitive at 3,200 feet of elevation, and man, we got it, 6 to 8 inches. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you look at the show notes this week, because frankly, I just couldn't take a bad picture. When I stuck the camera at the window and just looked out at our valley, it was breathtaking no matter what time of day. So you'll see at the top of the show notes, there's dusk and dawn of the same day. They're kind of in reverse order there. Just to show you that way the snow and the clarity of the light changed. It's the same view. It's just amazing. In the meantime, our show notes are on our group on Ravelry and also at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com. It's all one word. Wow, those are great pictures. In the meantime, Instagram is posting things saying they're going to have you control your followers from Facebook. Some of you who follow me are on one, some are on the other. I think most of you are on Instagram. We're going to cross that bridge when we come to it. I'm not quite sure I know what they mean, but if we have to make any changes, we will find a way. In the meantime, though I'm not adding new followers, except I had a rather experience this week, I co-broadcast with the Knitmores, and you know what that means. A bunch of Knitmore followers are going to go, who are you again? You have a what? Oh, let me come over and listen to it. So if I have any new Knitmore groupies, welcome to the sort of mellow land of cognitive, where we talk about cognitive psychology as well as knitting. Here in the warm thanks department, Amy S., thank you for your extremely generous coffee. That will certainly help me stay caffeinated. I could bounce off the walls with that much coffee. Thank you so much. I did not see the signing for the Super Bowl this year. Isn't that cute? Autocorrect changed it to singing. Ha ha ha. And you think autism isn't real. Anyway, I did not see it. But I did eventually see it on YouTube after seeing your comment on it. And it's really quite good. It's really good. It was good. Now, I really have very basic ASL. And what I found wonderful about this was that the person signing was sort of moving with the rhythm, was dancing, and the signing was very symbolic versus literal. It was cute when he was talking about fruited plains and he was eating fruit, which I assume is the word for fruit. I don't know that one. So if you're not an ASL speaker, you'd probably get a lot of it. What's really cool about that is in ASL you have what's called the classifier, and you sign that, the letter CL. And the classifier is you can enhance a sign with the movements of your body or the expression on your face. And so when you see a deaf performer signing music, lyrics, they're often doing that. They're often using classifiers to express the emotion of the music. And so it's just so beautiful. When he's singing the chorus, he's moving his arms in these great sweeping waves, because he's talking about from sea to shining sea, but he's also talking about the waves of amber grain and how the landscape of America is like this terrestrial ocean as opposed to a watery ocean. And it's something you can only do in sign. It's not something you can use the English language for as much. The closest you get is the metaphor of waves of shining grain. So you have the metaphor for waves like an ocean. And in ASL, you can actually perform it so that ocean of water merges with ocean of grain. And it's a very beautiful thing to see. So I do recommend you have a look at it. It is on YouTube. I also would like you to know, see, Amy, look what you started. I would like you to know that Marlee Matlin, who you've heard of, the deaf actress, who is known for winning an Oscar for Children of a Lesser God, she performed the national anthem side by side on stage with Garth Brooks in 1993. And her performance was considered wonderful, to the point where hearing people complained that she should not have been on the stage with him because her movements and signing somehow distracted the hearing from Garth standing there performing it. And no disrespect to Mr. Brooks, who probably would have resented this kind of backlash as much as any deaf person would have. At any rate, they no longer put the signer next to the singer because they don't want those deaf people to show up those professional artists, if you can believe that. Talk about an insult to deaf people. Talk about an insult to an Oscar-winning actress, Marlee Matlin, that she's not allowed to speak her native language, so to speak, next to a guy who can sing in heard song. Really impressively discriminatory, and still goes on to this day. So thank you, Amy S., for a very generous coffee, and also for giving me a chance to rant. But the amazing thing about that is so subtle, as discrimination goes. And that's kind of important when you look at the isms, like racism, ageism, sexism. When you look at that, that's right. Discrimination isn't just some cop on a video cam shooting an unarmed black kid in the street. That is the big, screaming fire alarm siren of discrimination. Yes, in other words, that's horrifying enough, to put it mildly. But this is the kind of thing that teaches you how subtle discrimination is. That you actually can't stand next to a wildly popular hearing and singing performer if you're going to sign him in so expressive and beautiful a way that you might somehow distract from him. And again, I don't think Mr. Brooks had anything to do with the outcry or the decisions that happened afterwards. But it's really sort of horrifying, isn't it? In the meantime, I rant. So thank you also to our own Kath Wood for giving me the pleasure of a chin wag with you every week. Your coffee is generous, as always, and greatly appreciated. And thank you for clarifying even further the British take on bricking it, which seems to have to do with enormous fear resulting in bodily release of waste materials. Okay, all of us crazy, good-natured Yanks finally got it. Seriously, thank you, Kath Wood. It is a delight to have you listening. It's also a great compliment considering we are colleagues. I'm deeply complimented by that. And there's the unexpected thank yous. The Knitmores. I got on live on Instagram just on a whim Saturday night, thinking I'm just going to get on for like 2 minutes. And I'm going to say, hey, look, I'm not as sick as I may be posturing myself to be on social media. And Jasmine and Gigi joined in, and next thing I know, we're having this discussion of the aesthetic of art versus craft and various other things. And I haven't had a conversation that rapid and on that level in years, so I deeply, deeply enjoyed that. It was very interesting to me because Jasmine and I were both espousing the sort of feminist understanding that art has been rendered an elite category, and it's really a gender thing, that art belongs to males and craft belongs to females. But what you do with that, Jasmine and I were going different directions, and it was a really good discussion. I hadn't been able to save it on Instagram. I don't know if you would have been able to wade through it, because I think we were on for over an hour. And so just sitting around listening to us babble to get to that point might have exhausted an audience. But it was very interesting because Jasmine and I went the directions that people who espouse that particular belief go, in the way we looked at the difference between art and craft. And I'm not going to go into it again. I'll put you all to sleep. But it was really great. I deeply, deeply enjoyed it. The amazing thing about it is I don't disagree with her take on it. I think that both of us were espousing different facets of how you look at the value of art versus the value of craft. And before you can even do that, you have to define them. And this is where I'm going to stop, or you'll be here for some kind of cultural lecture instead of the chaotic joy that is the Cognitive Podcast. So rolling right along, I get into the bathtub Sunday, and I'm thinking, it's late on a Sunday afternoon in Southern California. All my audience, except the Californians, are in different time zones, and they're cooking dinner or going to bed. So they're in the bathtub. I get this wild hair, and I turn on live in Instagram thinking it's hilarious, that it's going to be obvious I'm in a bathtub, but I'm not going to show anything. Yeah, that went on for 9 minutes, and I was a little bit shocked, because I just meant to get on and go, hey guys, what I meant to say yesterday in my live with the Knitmores is I'm okay, don't worry about it, and the blizzard, we're getting through it. But no, it was a lot of fun. And yes, I so appreciate the whole crowd who have joined in. I can't name everybody, but it was so good to see you all again. I do want to point out Natty Lady. We got Natty Lady in. Natty Lady is one of these insanely loyal followers who just comments on everything on the social media. And again, I don't open my social media. I closed it a while back because of the spamming and because of my history as a prison psychologist. But Natty got in there, and Natty is like one of these incredibly faithful people, and I don't mention her nearly enough. So little hats off. The other one was Kazoo Knitter, who I have not heard from in a while, and I'm a big fan of Kazoo because I, too, have frequented the wild realms of Kalamazoo for the medieval Congress that used to be up there and may still be for all I know. Now, at a moment like this, I know you're all thinking, hey, what about COVID? Yeah, I saw a news flash yesterday that they actually did decide it leaked from a lab. And I didn't follow up on it because I've always been in the same place on that. And when I say always, I mean since the days I was getting my first master's in comparative physiology back in '82. And this place is simply, we know that if we want to study dangerous diseases, we are going to keep them alive in laboratory conditions. And alive, when you talk about a virus or some type of bacteria, is a very strange word. We don't even know what alive means for them. Let me tell you, alive is a clear category pretty much when you're a mammal. But when you're a bacteria or a virus, not so clear. And so the idea that we are going to study these and develop cures means we are going to live with a risk that somebody's going to mishandle this stuff. This was a major topic in medical ethics back in 1979 when I first went to university, and it is a major topic now. And all I can tell you is you pay your money and you take your choice about the risks we're going to run. Having said that, does this mean we're going to go string up poor Dr. Fauci? No. I think you have to realize we've all kind of cooperated in this risk. If you've agreed to get a flu shot, you have agreed to this risk. Because where do you think flu shots got developed? And when you look at what vaccination has done for us, yeah. So I don't care anymore. What I do care about is, have you had your most recent vaccine? Do you have a good shot record that you carry with you? Have you gotten shots for everybody in your family, including the people who are immunologically compromised and the underage people? That's what I would really like you to go do. Having said all that, what's on my hooks and needles? You must be wondering.
And I'll bet you are, because I'm just rambling along here on a kind of gooey Monday afternoon as everything melts. It's about 40 degrees outside. And everything's dripping. It's 39, yes. And everything's dripping and it's cloudy. And everything's just in that kind of aftershock of a blizzard where it's drippy and miserable and melty. And I'm just waiting for the inevitable flood in downtown Acton, which is nowhere near where I live. So, meanwhile, my hooks and needles. You know what's finished? Why, my hat. I did a hat using Dizzy Blonde Studios colorway in honor of Nichelle Nichols' collaboration with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. If you did not know, the late Lieutenant Uhura, or Lieutenant for you beloved Brits, Nichelle Nichols was recruited by NASA just about the time Star Trek, the first series, the original series, was fading. And she was recruiting people to NASA, including representatives of minority groups. This is the woman who gave us astronauts who are not all white guys. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. If anybody deserves a tribute, it's you, because, as has been said elsewhere, all our national organizations should represent, our nation. At any rate, so we have this beautiful, beautiful colorway. And it is sad because the photos don't capture it. It is one of the prettiest colorways I've worked with in a long time. It's blues and it's got bits of NASA green, which is kind of a limey, bright lime green, and a little hint of white. So it's NASA's colors. I used the basic ribbed hat pattern from Pearl, P-U-R-L, Soho. This is free online on their website. You can get all the details. The link is in the show notes for my Ravelry page, which will take you to all the details. It came out beautifully. When I make a DK hat, the Pearl Soho Basic Ribbed Hat is my hat template when I knit a hat in ribbing. I treat it very much the same way as I treat any knitted hat. 4 inches of ribbing, because I happen to like watch caps. I like a really firm band around my ears. And then, of course, in every other weight of yarn, I switch to stockinette. But no, not in DK weight. For some reason, I've gotten hooked on this pattern, which is ribbed right up to the crown. And so I get 4 inches in, and then I'm like, I did a little more than 4 inches. I'll just keep going, and so on. But these make remarkably handsome watch caps. And yes, if you're going to make a hat, I make a watch cap. I haven't found a good hood pattern that I like, but I'm still looking, because I've always wanted to make really just a little hood, but they can be very uneven in knitting patterns. So there I am in my template watch cap for DK weight yarn. In progress, well, this has been interesting. In my stash toss, I am now at 14 skeins in and 16 skeins out of the stash for 2023, which makes me very happy. The interesting thing about this count is I have stopped myself from buying yarn on sale about 6 times since the beginning of the new year because I'm doing this. And I'm really, really happy. It's making me very, very conscious of my stash. And that is just a marvelous thing, I have to tell you. So I am trying to get back now to Vestuary 2023. And I had a really interesting experience with this. And I can't remember if I told you this, that I've been untwisting the stitches. That when I am knitting back and forth, side to side, as I am for the back of the vest, let me make this clear. This is Ann Budd's basic vest pattern from the Knitter's Handy Book of Pattern, a classic that I think everybody should own. And I do the vest from the bottom up. Now, Ms. Budd knits these in pieces and seams them together, which would probably be faster, to be honest, than the way I do it. I knit in the round from the bottom up till I get to the armholes, and then I basically put the front on yarn, on stitch holders. I leave the live stitches on long strands of yarn so they don't go anywhere. And then I do the back. I go up the back and, I finish the back, and then I go back, do the front, which is a V-neck, and then I join the shoulders, and then I pick up the stitches to do the neck and the armhole ribbing. Okay, so I'm working my way up the back, and once you get to the top of the back, everything goes really quickly in my experience. And what always happens is my tension changes when I go from knitting in the round to knitting side to side. And I've always blamed my purl stitches, and I do my purl stitches like the rest of us do our purl stitches, and they work out fine everywhere else. But on these, you can see the shift. And so this time, of course, I started knitting backwards instead of purling. Knitting backwards is purling. It's just that you keep the knit side facing you, and instead of turning it around and purling, you keep the knit side facing you, and you just do this kind of reverse movement with your needles. Now, I have checked this over and over since the time I learned it, and I've always been able to do it. It's always been right, but for some reason on these vests, it's not. I had a bit of an apotheosis here, and I started just changing the direction that I wrap the yarn around the needle when I'm knitting backwards. Now, I can tell you, I am wrapping the yarn the wrong direction, and yet it's working. So I am still busily untwisting those stitches. Will I drop down all the rows to the bottom of the back and fix those first 20 rows? What, are you kidding me? They're not that visible, but it's an important lesson learned. So hopefully I'll get that finished. Since today is the 27th of February as I record this, I'm not going to get the vest finished by the end of Vestuary, but that's okay. I've certainly got enough of it, which is good because I've since gotten contaminated by millions of beautiful sweater patterns for things I'd like to knit. At the same time, I was roaming through the sock stash and realized I've got some pairs, just 2 or 3, that have felted beyond all relief. And now I'm looking at them and going, I should take those babies and felt the living heck out of them. Like put them in the washer, put it on hot, run them through a whole cycle, and then stick them in the dryer. Why? Because, thanks to the lovely book about crafting with cat hair that I reviewed a few episodes back, I've realized that it would be great to just cut those felted socks into rectangles and use them for mending things. They would be terrific. Tight, really heavy fabric that would mend jeans and oh my gosh, in crazy beautiful socks. When you think about these wonderful variegated sock colorways I've been using, and then you think about them as heavy felted patches, these things should be on all my jeans, even when I don't have holes in them. The only problem is I don't wear jeans, but I'm thinking of taking those little templates of kitty cats from the Crafting with Cat Hair book and getting an X-Acto knife and cutting out little kitty cats in my felted socks and just sewing them on things. Oh man, the possibilities, I tell you. I say this because the first sock I noticed this was a tiger pattern, that the fabric was meant to evoke tigers, and when it's felted, it really does. Running wild over here in the corner. Hey, it's the Amish in me. Just mend. Meanwhile, the lane splitter skirt. Boy, I wish I had finished that because I'd be wearing it every day right now because of the cold. But I'm going to sit down and get that finished. And, hopefully there's always next year. The Don't Know Yet had a terrific week. I was sick as a dog this week. And I got so sick on Thursday and Friday. I'm not kidding you. I couldn't even knit. It really was exhausting. So I sat on my couch, wrapped in blankets and sweaters, and I seamed. As a result, I've now got 10 rows completely joined with all the ends tucked in. 9 more rows to go. Row number 11 is clipped together, and it's about 2/3 of its small seams done, which means I'm down to the last row 12, that I did not have enough clips to clip together, so it's sitting in a project bag in the cardboard box of Doomy Doom Doom. The cardboard box of Doomy Doo Doom, for those of you who don't remember, is a carton sitting in my beautiful study, uglifying the place under my work table. I want to get rid of the cardboard box of Doomy Doom Doom. Where did it come from? Last year when I made a temperature blanket, I bought 2 kits from Knit Picks of the yarns I wanted. I did not make the beautiful projects they suggested. I used them to make my temperature blanket. So I bought 20 skeins. And when I was finished the temperature blanket, I had 46 skeins left over. Why? Because I have so little self-control around sales. So now you know all about the beautiful Don't Know Yet blanket. It is the leftovers from the much smaller temperature blanket. So the goal this year was my study is filled with yarn and disorganized with knitting accoutrements, shall we say. And so I wanted to clean out the study. So I started with, I'm going to empty out the box of Doomy Doom Doom. Well, no, what I did was as I emptied it, I filled it with other things. So we're still working on that one. However, the study is much cleaner because I really tried to limit myself to using up everything around me in the study. And that has gone really, really well. But the box suddenly does look much more empty. The fact that it's got 2 sweaters worth of yarn sitting in it, I know, well, you'll have to forgive me. Getting back to it, I have been sleeping in my study on the love seat because I needed to stay upright. And it turns out I can prop myself really well into an upright sitting position and sleep incredibly comfortably on my love seat with pillows and blankets and whatnot propping me up. So I have slept there for 3 or 4 nights now, and it's been actually really good because when I lie down, my sinuses flood and all sorts of unpleasant things happen, including pain in my teeth that keeps me from sleeping. When I'm upright, I don't get all the sinus pain. Okay, so I'm sitting there on this couch for 4 days straight, not able to do much. So you betcha I just sat there and did the completely mindless seaming that putting together 361 crocheted squares requires. You can see a picture of the, one version of the finished blanket. That's just all the squares laid out on the floor. It's not quite accurate anymore, but it's been my guide. And so, at any rate, I had all these little clips, 150 of them, and I was clipping together squares, and I ran out of clips. So for rows, I think it was 7 through 12, all I could do was take each row and take a photograph of it with my phone so that I would remember it, and put a big number label on it so I would remember it. And then I just put each separate row in a project bag. And the remaining rows, 13 through 19, which are clipped together, are in our master bedroom on a trunk waiting to be used. So the big goal was get through these unclipped squares. Clip them together one at a time, making sure from the photographs I got it right, seam them together, and so on. So this is a big thing because it takes a lot of junk out of the cardboard box of Doomy Doom Doom. So things are looking good. Are you following all this? It's a little wacky. But if you give a girl a box and you put it in her study at her feet, she's just going to keep filling it with projects she can do, thinking that she's getting them off the floor when she really isn't. She's just getting them out of other clothes cartons where they were not as obnoxious looking. So here we are, emptying the box of Doomy Doom Doom, which I have since filled with 2 sweaters. Each one of those is in yarn that's been in my stash for at least 10 years. So I'm really working on those deep stash dives. That is the point of all this, I guess. So in the meantime, that is going really, really well. And you can see pictures of various angles of the first 10 rows. It's really shocking. It is half done. It's really, really shocking because it's turning out exactly the way I want it to. And again, you worry about, will the seams pucker? Will this look right or wrong? Let me tell you, when a blanket gets this big and this heavy, it starts stretching itself and blocking itself. So the answer is the seams look great. The other funny thing was, I can't remember if it was Jasmine or Gigi referred to me as someone who likes to do blankets. And I thought, no, I hate doing blankets. Then I realized, actually, that's idiotic. I actually do a lot of blankets. I do them in crochet. I'm not going to sit around and knit a blanket because I like the fabric just as well in crochet. In fact, somewhat better because it's somewhat heavier. And let me tell you, the speed of crochet, life isn't long enough for me to knit all these blankets, whereas crocheting, I'm fine with that. The other embarrassing thing is if you look at my Ravelry projects page, you will see I've done quite a fair share of blankets. I did a lot of knitted baby blankets way back when I was young as a knitter, and when I was working in agencies where several of the clinicians got pregnant every year. It was a very popular thing to make knitted baby blankets in those days. Yeah, back in the Stone Age of the early 2000s. Okay, meanwhile, in the Don't Know Yet, that means I actually have 190 blocks out of 361 blocks assembled and finished. So we're working on that last 171. The Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery, not yet. I'm waiting for the warmer weather. In the cold weather, it's just fun to make blankets and big projects and sweaters. Let's be honest, that's my excuse. The Lady Eleanor shawl, that is another big thing. That's basically sweater sized. I am on skein 7 of 11, so we know that one's coming. I've just got to get back to it. You can still find a list of my favorite resources, which range from indie yarn dyers to suppliers for the basic knitting essentials to a few local brick and mortar yarn stores, a few online presences. Oh yes, so there they all. And finally, of course, Birch and Cider, because they do those custom leather tags that we're all just liking to attach to our finished projects. Dizzy Blondes, no real spinning that you haven't heard about. Still working on the Fuzzball of Minerva every day. That's about to intensify because I have 3 large double-coated dogs as well as a double-coated cat. And it's February in Southern California, which means despite the crazy outside with the blizzards, everybody's going to start shedding. So this should get pretty intense. Strategy, that's what you've all been hanging around for. Well, we pretty much have done the interpersonal strategies from dialectical behavioral therapy. And so I thought I would circle back to mindfulness because I have been reading recently about Japanese cognitive strategies. And now when I say that, I am not an expert on Japanese culture. And so this is really pop culture stuff that I'm picking up off the internet. There's been a recent fascination with various Japanese values. I can't identify what that even means to say Japanese value. Buddhist Japanese, Shinto Japanese, I don't know. I just don't know enough about the subculture. So I'm sort of classing this all together as Japanese. However, some of these guys are really interesting to me because they really align with the best of cognitive behavioral strategy. These values assume a central ego, organizing the life of the individual, and that ability to control one's life, to guide it purposefully, is very much in keeping with the strategies of cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, CogB, curiously, is identified as a development of the philosophy of Western Europe called Stoicism. And it's kind of Stoicism with mindfulness thrown in when you do dialectical behavioral therapy. I have been a Stoic since I learned Latin in 9th grade and started reading. I can't believe I talk like this. Started reading the Stoic philosophers in, wait for it, Latin! I was not a normal kid. But those were not normal times, I think, compared to now, that it was considered completely reasonable that you would go to an all-girls private Catholic high school and learn Latin. And the best way to learn any language that's dead is to read its great literature. This leads me to weird moments where I realize I may be the only human you've ever talked to who's fluent in Latin. Although they're not always. I just made an interesting mistake the other day and kind of caught it. And I caught it while I was watching a video of an instrument, a musical instrument designed by Leonardo da Vinci. And the maker is a Polish instrument manufacturer. And on the front of it, he wrote in Latin. And I'm sitting there watching one of the representatives of that marvelous company play this instrument, which looks like a harpsichord, but it's got a few significant differences, which I'm not going to go into. And on the front, in tribute to Da Vinci, they wrote in Latin the name of the company, etc. And I'm reading the Latin, and I suddenly went, oh, isn't that interesting? I've been spelling that word wrong. So even I still get corrected. I'm so pleased someone else out there in Poland speaks better Latin than I do. At any rate, this is one of those weird moments in life where you go, yeah, here I am 50 years later, and I'm still thinking about Latin. It's a great thing to have learned in my youth. And when you read Latin, when you study any dead language, you're going to have to embrace the literature of that language. There's no other way to learn it. You have to read the literature from the far past. So yeah, I'm out there reading Suetonius, who's marvelous gossip, and Marcus Aurelius, who's one of my all-time favorites, Meditations. So here we go. In that spirit, The Japanese philosophies and philosophical stances are very reminiscent of Stoicism to me. With that in mind, I'm going to talk about one of them, which is the concept, and forgive me because I do not speak any variant of Japanese, so I am sure to be mispronouncing this, but Ikigai, I-K-I-G-A-I, and this means purpose. Now, I really like this because this so aligns with the whole ACT theory of psychological flexibility. That, I've talked about ACT before. In fact, I think I summarized it again in the last episode. But on the ACT hexagon, where you have the 6 ideas that bring people into therapy, and when you correct them appropriately, or when they correct them, we're just consultants, you get to a state of psychological flexibility. What really shocked me was I was reading these different websites on 7 different Japanese principles and 10 different Japanese principles, and most of them pretty much agree. But they sound like Japanese ACT therapy. And that's kind of an insult to the Japanese, because it might be more realistic to say that the ACT model sounds like American Japanese core philosophy. Having said this, Ikigai comes close, I think, to the idea of having values in ACT therapy. Ikigai is you're looking for your purpose in life. Now, in Western philosophy, there's been a long and healthy debate about what that even means. Is there a purpose out there waiting for you? Or, as the existentialists say, do you have to make it yourself? Do you have to find it? I don't know. But the idea is you spend your life trying to identify your purpose, and you're going to organize the actions of your life meaningfully around that purpose. What I really like here is you have a concept, and I may be really Americanizing this. I'm sure I am, but even so, I'm going to go there. Forgive me. If you're Japanese, I know I'm going to get a flood of comments, and that would be good. I could afford to learn more about this, so you should feel free. But what I love about this is whether you think you have to pursue a purpose that is waiting for you to locate it out there in space, or whether you think you yourself create your purpose, or I would think more in a kind of middle ground, that as you move through life, you explore your likes and dislikes, and you begin to realize what you're good at, and you begin to orient yourself towards being better at that, and design a life that's based on using your skills to formulate and develop an idea of a meaningful purpose for you. So somewhere in the middle between the two extremes. Either way, that is in the best tradition of Stoicism and cognitive behavioral therapy, that your overall life is guided in the day-to-day by this overarching idea of what you are meant to be doing. This can play out in so many ways. These are the discussions that have been meaningful to me throughout my life when I've talked to other professional women, and they've talked about they feel a drive to be mothers, but they're also driven to be college professors or psychologists, and they're trying to mediate those. At the heart of that is a sense that we are sharing, that we consider ourselves to have a higher purpose as mothers and wives and creatives and intellectuals. And we are striving to shape our lives consciously. So purpose may not be tightly formulated, but I think it's this guiding principle, and it's akin to the idea of having values. My values are to be a creative professional, an intellectual, a feminist, a wife, a mother. And that's ACT right there. Okay, but the idea is your life is not just bouncing out of control at every moment, that you are actively changing and shaping and crafting your own life. Of course, on the ACT hexagon, this is kind of a merger of values and committed action, that you're trying to live your values and present them through the way you live, through committed action to perform those values. I could argue even further, this very much relates to different spiritual paths. Having been raised as a Roman Catholic, there's this really nice concept in several faiths, I don't think it's limited to Catholicism, that you can't do enough praying, that communicating with the higher divinity or unity, whatever you think is up there. And so instead of thinking of, I'm going to say this prayer, you think of your entire day as a devotional act. And again, I think that's a really beautiful spiritual way of talking about committed action to live your values. I was listening to an Ojibwe man, James Vukolich, who I really like, who talks about Ojibwe values on Instagram and I believe TikTok. And he was talking about the Ojibwe elders and how they believe that your life is committed to 7 higher values. And I was sort of bouncing ideas back and forth that in my faith of origin, I didn't name the faith, that is akin to this idea that every day, every action is a committed prayer. And so the worst thing you can do with this philosophy is go to bed at night and think that you made a lousy prayer, that your day, your life, your actions, your purpose is dedicated along this set of higher values. And in the Ojibwe sense, the higher values are to serve the family of all our relatives, which is not just humans, from what I understand. So anyway, I'm back here. I'm wandering far away from Ikigai, but I'm not, because I think what I'm really saying is this idea of Ikigai, of purpose, of being committed to a core central purpose, of seeing your life as having meaning and direction, is a really great way to bring mindfulness into your life. So what am I doing today that fulfills a higher purpose? Early in my youth, I don't want to go too deeply because it's kind of personal even for me, but I saw myself as a teacher very young. And so as I sit in a podcast, that is my Ikigai. That is the purpose I have always known for myself. And part of the formation of what I am has been around that idea of what makes me have the right to teach, what would make me a good teacher, and what is the level of commitment when you teach. What does it mean to be that person? And what are your responsibilities? What is the duty you have taken on there? So that to me is kind of a loose version of Ikigai, but it's about mindfulness. It's about your life has meaning and direction. What you do matters. And so you need to commit to thinking actively about what you are doing. And one of the guiding principles here is, are you fulfilling your purpose every day? And I am willing to bet that my listeners of different major faiths could look, if they've studied their faith enough, could look into their faith and see some version of that. I think humans are very deeply driven. And this is the Stoic in me. We all want purpose, guys. And I think it's all over spiritual belief, the good stuff. I don't mean I'm not talking about, the multimillionaire pastors on television, those jerks. I'm talking about real spirituality, not just religious dogma. Okay, so talking about mindfulness, I think it's a good time to consider what is your purpose. And it may not be tidy. You may not be able to say, yes, I am here to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. You're not there to say that. I can't say that about my purpose. All I can say is a driving purpose in my life has been the sense that I'm an effective teacher and it's a gift I should be using with responsibility. And is that my only purpose? No, I doubt it. But I think it's really key to have a sense that you have purpose, that your life has meaning. It may have a hard to define purpose or a very multivariant purpose, but I think it's important to let that be in your life and to consider how your days and actions are fulfilling that. And I think that's a very high form of mindfulness. Having said that, the fluffy books, nothing new there. I did put my favorite quote about dragons in the show notes because I am still listening to Jane Austen's Dragons at night to go to sleep. And I'm enjoying them. So I did finally break down and put the link to the main page on Amazon for those books. I'm working my way again through Introduction to American Deaf Culture because I thought the teacher was only requiring us to do the first 4 chapters. No, she put up another quiz on 2 more chapters. That's great. So that's the other project for today, is to get through that study guide. But nothing really new. And I'll shoot. Well, I was stretching and biking this week, but Not too much, because I had to start sleeping upright and was kind of sick and had to take the time to just heal. So my exercise for this week consists of sleeping like the dead in a sitting position on the love seat in my study, wrapped in all my handmade blankets, including the Don't Know Yet, the first half of it. Something I really like, being at home in a blizzard. The interesting thing is, just as the blizzard hit its worst, I started to recover from the illness. So I got sick Tuesday night. I noticed I was coming down with something while I was lying in bed. Wednesday I woke up with a cold. Thursday I woke up, it came on really fast. I was not able to keep food down and having a rough day. And so Thursday and Friday and Saturday I was really just wiped out and helpless. And then Sunday I started to revive. So on Sunday I just decided, the boys went out and it was still blizzarding up here. We woke up on Sunday morning with 8 inches of snow, but I just decided it was my secret spa day because the boys had gone out. So I submerged myself in an insanely good Epsom salt and bubble bath. I just mixed them. You can see my favorite Epsom salts there. I have to be careful. Dr. Teal's makes these great Epsom salt blends, but they do mix lavender in, and I'm allergic to it, so I'll be scratching and itching all day. But this one was really terrific, the one I had. It had clay, ginger and clay, I think, and it was just so invigorating. And the bathroom still smells great 24 hours later. So you can see me all wrapped up in my towels, enjoying my secret spa day. You can also see one of those beautiful secrets of my life on the corner of my bathtub. I was thinking I should just put a bar of soap here and leave it here. Why do I keep not having soap out on the bathtub? And then realized, because it makes a gooey mess, of course. And so I suddenly turned around and realized I've got a spare crocheted by me in kitchen cotton type stuff placemat. Why, like a cup mat. Why am I not using that? So I had this wonderful thing because I suddenly found I had a whole bunch of these little mug mats, and I just started putting them all over the bathroom and putting soap and whatnot, gooey containers on them. So that made me happy on top of everything else. And today I've been crocheting a few more of those guys because I think it's worth just having like 10 mug mats that you've hand crocheted around the house. I use the kitchen cotton type of yarn. It's got to be cotton, mostly heavy cotton and whatever else they want to blend into it. And they're very, very cheap. You can get peaches and cream or whatnot on sale at Joann's all the time. But I keep those around, and every so often I go into a binge of making those. And I had sort of run low on those. They just aged out, and they had become rags around the house, and eventually got tossed into compost because they will deteriorate happily there. And so, I made a whole bunch more, and I'm making a whole bunch more because in the cardboard carton of Doomy Doom Doom at my feet, I have a couple skeins of that stuff that I just found during my stash toss. So I'm enjoying making a whole bunch more of those. If you've never done it, this is one of the reasons you crochet. You just crochet these little squares or rectangles, and you keep them around the house. They make great coasters, great mug mats, or they can be the mat that goes under your soap on the side of your bathroom sink so that your counter doesn't get gooey from damp soap. Anyway, so, crocheting. If you're a knitter and you don't crochet, I'm really sorry. You should try it. It's so easy and great, and you get to do so many quick, useful things. I'm so rambly today. Put a lid on it. Well, as always, the tea tastings. And because I got so dehydrated this week, I went back to making iced tea by the vat in my mason jars, in my quart mason jars. And that's been a godsend, that there's always something interesting to drink. There's only so much bland water you can drink. But I started feeling good yesterday, Sunday. And so, of course, it went kind of like this. I got up and I said, geez, I've been sick since like Wednesday and I suddenly have energy. And I was totally drained of energy, which is odd for me. And suddenly yesterday, energy. So I get up and I decided to get dressed. And I said, instead of a shower, I could take a long hot bath. And I said, well, the bathtub needs a little tidying because Minerva likes to walk through it, leaving cat hair behind, which sticks to its surface. So I said, I need a big container to just rinse out the bathtub with. It'll make it so much faster. Okay, so I go out to the kitchen to get a big container, and I say, oh, look at that. I forgot. I threw together the ingredients for keto bread, and they have to sit out overnight to let it rise, and it's just sitting there on the counter. And I said, well, it'll take no time at all to just oil the pizza pan and then form this stuff into little balls and stick it in the oven to bake. So I'm doing that. The oven is preheating, and it's taking forever because, look, it's cold outside. And so while the oven is preheating, I'm thinking, well, gosh, hot bread, why don't I make hot artichoke cheese dip? Basically, it's a can of artichoke hearts, and you drain them and chop them up, which takes like a second. And then a cup of mayonnaise. I use an avocado oil-based mayonnaise, which I think gives it a lot more flavor, but also you get away from the unhealthy fats in regular mayonnaise. And then, of course, I took a brick of exceptional cheddar from Trader Joe's, and I just grated it, which takes all of a minute. And that's enough. I didn't measure beyond that. So I threw all these things together in a bowl, mixed them all up, and then slathered them across the bottom of a Pyrex baking dish, 13 by 9. So this is a pretty thin layer because you want it all exposed to the heating elements in your oven so that you want all that mayo and stuff to melt. You want it to turn into oil and get nice and hot around the avocado and cheese, which will melt. So I thought, well, as long as I'm making these little pieces of keto bread, I could just make that because they just all go in for the same amount of time in the same heated oven. So, of course, I'm doing that, and suddenly I'm waiting around for 45 minutes for these to bake. Notice I've totally forgotten about getting a container to rinse out the bathtub. And I said, well, gosh, as long as the oven's hot, why don't I just throw together a brownie recipe? Because, it's basically a dump recipe. Just put it in a bowl, mix it up, and put it in a pan. So I do that, and of course, once I got the brownies made up, and I was waiting for the bread and the artichoke dip to get out of the oven so I could put the brownies in, I said, it would go really, really well with bread and cheese dip? Yeah, tomato soup. So the Instant Pot was right there on the counter, so I grabbed all the ingredients for that, made curried tomato soup, and of course I put that in. The bread and the cheese dip came out. I put them on the counter. They were too hot to eat. So I put the brownies in the oven, and I said, well, now I've got to wait to have my lunch for the bread and cheese to cool down enough. So I thought, oh, this is all so hot. Ooh, it's very hot. I could use something cooling. So I made chia pudding and put that in the fridge to set up. Chia pudding, the recipe is in the show notes. All of these things are so insanely mindlessly easy. That was what was amazing. So I finished with the hot rolls, the hot artichoke cheese dip, the hot curried tomato soup, the beautiful freshly made brownies, and chia pudding. And I'm really happy because I've been living on my husband's cooking since I've been sick. And my husband kind of cooks one way. Everything goes through the frying pan. And he kind of resents when you cook any other way, although he'll tolerate baking, but like you put something in a slow cooker or pressure cooker, and he gets weird about it. So anyway, it's kind of nice when I cook for myself a little bit. He has been very good about my being keto for now almost 5 years. He's really good about that. He understands that it's probably saved my life as a type 2 diabetic. But, it's odd because he just wants to fry everything. At any rate, so there it all is, and if you want to know how to make chia pudding, this is mindless. Half a cup of chia seeds. Just buy a bag of them at the health food store, 1.5 cups of hot water. You mix those together, and you just let them sit for about 10 minutes. You want those seeds to soak up the water. And then the original recipe I have says use pandan, which is a flavoring, I think, out of the Philippines. I'm not sure. I've never been able to find it, even online. So I used peppermint extract. Boy, did the pudding come out good. Anyway, after your chia seeds have soaked for 10 minutes in the hot water, I added a half teaspoon of peppermint extract, or you could use any extract you want. Coffee, chocolate, anything would probably work. And 1 can cream of coconut. You can use coconut milk, but cream of coconut is just a little bit richer. And then 1/3 cup of swerve. Mix it all together. Leave it to set up in your fridge. It's not going to be like an American pudding where it's real thick and stiff. It's a bit runny, and I love it. So enjoy that. It makes a nice dessert. It's very nice in hot weather, I might add. So we are on to the blather. You remember the blather? Really, the blather this week is about the blizzard of 23, that nobody moves to Southern California below 4,000 feet in elevation and says, oh, yeah, we'll have blizzards. But there we did. We had one, and it looks like we might be having another one coming in. It's been really exciting. We're so grateful. It's not enough for the drought, but it's certainly helping. So I posted our temperatures for this week, which is pretty hideous. Highs in the low 40s. It's like I've been teleported, to the Philadelphia suburbs in March. And I have pictures of the farm coated in snow. My son went out, and he just went out on Sunday. He put on a coat because Sunday morning it got sunny, and he just romped. He played in the snow. He laid in the snow. He made snow angels. He came in. He wanted me to take pictures of him covered in snow. And he brought me, it was the cutest thing. He goes, look, Mom, I found a new plant. And it's a little weed of some sort, but the ice crystallized around it. It's like a hand with 5 fingers coming up to grasp the plant, which is coming out of the middle of the palm. It was so beautiful. So he's standing there like Joe Cool in the picture, and you can see both my icicle plant and my dashing young man, 16 years old, standing there looking like Joe Cool. The thing about my son, my husband and I always wonder about this. He does Joe Cool effortlessly. He has always had natural cool. Even as a kid, he would just stand a certain way, and all the girls in his class would look at him and sigh and faint. He just has it, and he doesn't know he does it, which is what makes it really funny. He's like his father. He's very unself-conscious about how attractive he is. In the meantime, ASL class, we didn't have to meet last week, so we have class, 2 nights from now. And we're basically working our way through the discussion on cochlear implants and deafness. And the interesting thing about that, one of our assignments, since we didn't have class, I decided I'll do one of the papers. So one of the papers is get an article and summarize it and give some feedback, about 1 page. So I did that, and I had a good time because I reactivated my membership in the UCLA library system, and you can get access to the UC libraries as a citizen of the state of California. You should look into this. Go to UCLA's library online, and you can follow the rabbit hole from there. So I went through their library, and I found a Journal of Social Sciences that had a great article by a researcher who is interested in what she calls the neuropolitics of deafness, where science meets politics meets deaf culture. So I found one of her articles and I summarized it. A very nice summary, if I do say so myself. It's only a page. It's actually only about 3/4 of a page. And then I wrote a brief response about the risks we take in science and how that is an uneasy thing for many of us who are trained in the idea that you never put a patient at risk. So I wrote that. A few days later, to my surprise, I see somebody else has done an article, because these aren't due till April 23rd, But anyway, I looked at her summary. First of all, it was, as it turns out, almost as long as the article. And secondly, I believe it was written with an AI machine of some sort, because it was kind of incoherent, but it wasn't incoherent in a way a speaker of English would be incoherent. And I know this person is a native speaker. And I couldn't figure it out. I read her article and I just said, what the heck are you even saying? Like, I can't even tell what you're talking about. Fortunately, we have to give a link back to the original article, which has to be online. So I read the original article, which was from The Guardian, was very coherent, and I had to write a response to it, which I did. And I wrote a very good response, which frankly was far more coherent than her summary, and was very loosely linked to her summary, because her summary didn't make sense, to be honest. But I realized afterwards, oh my Lord, I think that is an AI robot. I don't think she wrote anything. I think she just fed it into an AI program. I say this because I'm a former English professor. And one of the things that scares me about the AI robots is that the generation developing now in high school and college, I'm afraid they will lose their individual autonomous voices. And these are voices I would like to hear. I value their originality and their ideas. Young people are worth valuing because they want to change things for the positive. And they have a lot to say. And so as a former professor myself, I've always treasured that. What worries me is if they just start using AI to write all their term papers, They're not going to work to learn to write or to express themselves, and they're not going to contribute their voices. I find this a little terrifying. It reminds me of that thing that we all hit in feminist studies years ago, where you look at all these women writers, and I'm going to use Western European history because that's what I know best, and you have these brilliant voices like Mary Wollstonecraft writing about women, her daughter, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, inventing Frankenstein, and, I can't think of her name, their colleague who invented computers, basically, invented the first programming. And you think, these are women and they're suppressed, and yet they're coming up with all this brilliant stuff, these masterworks, and you think, how many voices have we lost when we oppressed women and refused to educate them? And, you can say that about people of color. You can just go crazy on this one. And now I think, oh my Lord, we've found a way to make it universal. That it won't just be about being an oppressed subculture. No, everybody's going to lose their voice with AI, and they're going to think it's a good thing. And this really disturbs me. So, anyway, I've seen my first AI product, and all I can tell you is, if you look at it, you'll know why I think it's AI. The pup date. Queenie bounced back from her spay like it never happened. 24 hours after she was neutered, she still was wearing the cone. She wore it for a week, and it became a tool that she used to bash the other dogs with, knock when she wanted to come in the house. She got so good with that cone, it was just hilarious. At the same time, it did calm her down. She did get trained not to jump on everything and make us crazy when she was in the house. We reached day 8 of Queenie in the cone, and the ice storms were now filling the cone with ice and snow. So fortunately, the cone came off just at the right time. Blankets is really disrupted because I'm not sleeping in my bed at night. I'm sleeping on the love seat. And blankets has taken to wandering in and out of my study, where I tend to be sleeping and reading all day these days because I've been sick, and moaning at me. My husband keeps saying, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with her is she's a German Shepherd. She hates it when you change the routine. It took me a few days to realize it, but she's deeply upset that I'm not where I belong. This is the dog who comes into my study to tell me that someone left the stove on unlit or lit at night. That shepherds are incredibly sensitive to how their environment runs when it's normal. And when something is abnormal, all of my shepherds have had the habit of coming to alert me. So as I sit here, Blankets is lying next to me in the study, something she never does, as close as she can get to me. She's not in distress. She just would like me to stop living in this room. Captain is Captain. I looked up discoid lupus, which is what Captain and Eleanor have on their noses, and it's just rare we got 2 of them together. It's basically bad sunburn, and it's not systemic. It's not going to kill her or even hurt her. It just means her nose looks rotten. So we keep putting meds, which she licks off immediately. Her tongue is long enough to do it, something poor Eleanor never could manage. So our Captain, she's running around. We medicate her nose once a day. She licks it right off. So we're probably going to give up on that one and accept that we have the Newfie with the funny-looking schnoz. But everybody is doing really well. On the calendar, I have added the Evolution of Psychotherapy Conference in Anaheim, which is December, I think, 12th through 23rd of 2023. This is getting to be a little embarrassing because the participants are getting so old. Pardon me, a lot of the really senior people are dying off, but the Board of Psychology just changed all its continuing ed requirements. And as always, evolution remains a fantastic way to take a few days off and meet all your continuing ed. Fortunately, I'll be able to do a lot of it online, which I'm so excited about. So I may or may not go down to Anaheim. Depends on how the bank is looking. Because right before Christmas, that's a bad time to spend money on a hotel. Grand Canyon and Sunnybank, I doubt it. But evolution, I have to do. I need those hours. Minerva gets the last word. If you want to see a cat weirded out, you should see Minerva in a blizzard. She sits at the window and is just baffled by it. She's fascinated by the dogs coming in with ice. So if Minerva was going to tell you anything this week, She would tell you to embrace the weird, and there's a picture of her sitting in her favorite window spot, staring out at the blizzard. She looks very flat-faced. You can see the Persian influence on her. Her face is actually not flat like a Persian. Her nose does protrude. But she also seems to have some Maine Coon in her, so she's got a big ruff. So the big ruff around her eyes and neck make her nose look like it's not standing out. But there's my weird little cat, who's not a little cat at all. And she is staring out into the snow, and she wants you to know, just roll with it, baby. Embrace the weird. Life is beautiful in its strangeness. Go out there and find your purpose and embrace it all. So on that happy note, I'm going to say, everybody, thank you for joining me. Remember, yes, it's winter. There's a pandemic. I'm not kidding you. I went out once without a mask. I walked into a burger place to pick up my salad last week. That is the only place I could have gotten this rotten infection I've got. And I got slammed. If ever there was a lesson in, look, guys, there's still stuff out there. It's the time of year. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Socially distance where you can. Get all your shots. Thank goodness I have pneumonia and flu shots. I'm so grateful right now, not to mention COVID. Get it all taken care of, because remember, we are a community. When we take care of our basic health, like our shots and just self-care like distancing and hand washing, we take care of the community. When we take care of the community, when we protect others from illness as well as ourselves, that is the best protection there will ever be for everybody. So when we take care of the community, we take care of ourselves. When we take care of ourselves, we're also taking care of the community. It flows in a circular manner, okay? So the important thing here, we're a community, we take care of each other. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.